Hello everyone, this is Prasanjit Ghosh and welcome to the Masterful Master. Today we are going to start a chapter, Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood by Anees Jung. Now, before understanding the chapter, let's understand what does the title of this chapter mean. Now, the word spring in the title refers to childhood. Well, Anees Jung refers spring as childhood. It is the symbol of joy, happiness, and hope. Now, the question arises, who has lost the childhood? Well, Anees Jung focuses on the underprivileged children who have lost their childhood due to poverty. They are poverty stricken. There are two stories in this chapter. One is related to Saheb and other is of Mukesh. Both these two child have lost their childhood. Why? Because of poverty. They are poverty stricken. Let's start the first story. Sometimes I find a rupee in the garbage. Now the story starts with writer asking Saheb, whom she sees every morning searching for gold in the garbage dumps. Now students pay attention, gold doesn't signify the actual gold here. There is an irony here. Saheb is a ragpicker, that means he collects garbages from the garbage dumps. So the useless things which are thrown away by us are precious for people like Saheb. It is like a gold because that's what rag pickers do. And Saheb is a rag picker. He collects garbages from garbage dumps. The writer sees him early morning visiting the garbage dump near her house, searching for something which can be useful for Saheb. Saheb had left his home long ago. His home was in Dhaka and was in the middle of green fields. Saheb does not remember it anymore. His mother told him that many storms destroy their houses and those green fields. That's why they left their homes and came to the big city in search of precious things in the garbage dumps. Replying to writer's question, Saheb replies that he does all these because he has nothing else to do. He says all these in a low voice. Now the writer is suggesting Saheb to go to the school. But soon she quickly realizes that her advice is meaningless. Now why the advice is meaningless? Because going to the school is a good thing. So why it is meaningless? It is meaningless because these poverty-stricken children are underprivileged. They don't get this opportunity to go to the school. They cannot afford it. So that's why this suggestion by the writer is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything to these children because they hardly get any opportunity to go to the school. Now Saheb, replying to the suggestion of the writer, replies that as soon as there will be school in the neighborhood, he'll go to the school. The writer to Saheb's reply says, what if she starts a school? Will Saheb come to the school? Of course she was not serious about this. It was half joke. To this, Saheb replies with a yes. The writer was not serious about starting a school. It was just a joke. To compensate, the writer says that it takes longer to build a school. She was quite ashamed of making such promise. Promises like these are made by politicians and government officials but are never fulfilled. It had been months she knew him already, and one day she asked Saheb's name. Saheb, like an announcement, replied, Sahib-e-Alam. The writer thought, what if Saheb actually knew the meaning of his name, which meant Lord of the Universe? It would have been a hard time for Saheb believing it if he actually knew what the name meant, because his life was completely opposite to his name. He roamed around with his friends barefoot, who appeared like morning birds and disappeared in the noon. Now for the past few months, the writer recognizes Saheb and all his friends. The writer asked one of them that why isn't he wearing a footwear? The boy replied that his mother did not get them down from the shelf. Another boy quickly interrupted and said that even if mother would have brought them down from the shelf, he would still not wear the footwear. He would simply throw them away. The boy himself was wearing a shoe which did not match. The writer then asked him this question, that why was he wearing unmatched shoe? He did not reply and started shuffling his shoes. Suddenly, a third boy said that he wants shoes. The writer gives an explanation about the condition of these children. She says that it is not the lack of money due to which they are barefoot. It is because of the tradition to stay barefoot. The writer wonders whether this is only an excuse to explain the never-ending state of poverty. The writer narrates a story which was told to her by a man from Udupi. Udupi is a town in Karnataka. When this man was young, he would walk to the school. On his way to the school, he crossed an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop at the temple and he would pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, the writer visited the town and the temple. New priest lives in the backyard of the temple where the writer could see red and white plastic chairs. She noticed a young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrives and was breathing heavily out of exhaustion. He arrived and threw the bag on the folding bed. Looking at this boy, the writer remembers about a prayer another boy had made 30 years before. He prayed to never lose the pair of shoes which he had. Young boys like the son of priest now wore shoes. This clearly shows the financial condition of the priest, which has improved 30 years later, where his son wears shoes, whereas many others like the ragpickers like Saheb remain underprivileged. The writer describes the area where ragpickers like Saheb live. They live in Simapuri, located on the outskirts of Delhi. Though it's on the outskirts, but still Simapuri has no resemblance with the country's capital. The people who live in Simapuri are squatters, which means they have unlawfully occupied the unused lands. These squatters came from Bangladesh in 1971 and Saheb's family was among them. Simapuri was then a wasteland. It still is, but it is no longer empty. Near about 10,000 ragpickers live in this wasteland, which is not empty anymore. There are structures made of mud with roofs made of thin sheets of tin or plastic. There is no sewage, no drainage, nor any running water facility in Simapuri. These ragpickers have lived here illegally for more than 30 years without any identity and without any permission. They have only been provided ration cards and voter identity cards. The ration cards enables them to get grains for their family. The writer asked the women wearing torn saris that why did they leave their homes in Dhaka. They replied that they were happy in Simapuri because here they could satisfy their hunger. These people traveled to places in search of food, and wherever they found food, they set up temporary homes. And there they started living. Their children grew up there, and gradually they also started helping their parents in seeking means of survival. And survival in Simapuri meant rag picking. As they have been doing this for years, they have mastered the art of rag picking. Garbage to them is like gold. They collect these garbages and sell them for food. They use these garbages to cover the roof of their homes. But for a child, it is much more than survival. Saheb says that sometimes he finds a rupee, even a 10 rupee note. When one can find silver coins in the garbage dumps, he never stops searching. There is always hope for more. For children, the garbages means fulfillment of dreams, but for parents, it is just a means of survival. One winter morning, the writer saw Saheb standing by a fence of a club. He was watching a tennis game being played by two young men. Saheb liked the game but couldn't play it. He told the writer that he goes inside the club when no one is around. The gatekeeper allows him. Saheb is wearing tennis shoes, but these shoes are worn out. He tells to the writer that someone gave it to him. These shoes were thrown away by a boy from a rich family, and these shoes also had holes in it. And this did not bother Saheb at all. For a boy like Saheb, even shoes with holes was a dream come true. But the desire to play tennis was out of his reach. One morning, the writer met Saheb, who was on his way to the milk booth. He was holding a steel container. He told her that he had got a job at a nearby tea stall. He was paid 800 rupees including meals. The writer asked whether he liked the job as she could see that he had lost the carefree look. Saheb now works for someone else and carries his master's container. Earlier, as a ragpicker, the bag was his and was his own master. But now he is no longer his own master. In the previous story, we saw that in the end, Saheb was no longer his own master. But this story starts with Mukesh insisting on being his own master. He wants to be a motor mechanic. The writer asks whether Mukesh knows anything about car. The boy confidently replied that he would learn to drive a car. His dreams though seemed real, but it was far from reality. Mukesh lived in Firozabad, which was famous for bangles. Every other family in Firozabad is engaged in bangle making. It was the center of glass blowing industry. Mukesh's family is also involved in the profession of bangle making. No one there knows that it is illegal for children like Mukesh to work in the glass furnace with high temperature. The workplace are hot, dark closed, rooms without ventilation. If the law is enforced, then it would rescue almost 20,000 children from these places. Children working in these places often lose their eyesight. It is not a happy scenario for children, it's a kind of death trap. Mukesh took the writer to his home and was feeling proud that his town was being renovated. They walked down the streets, which were full of garbages and gave foul smell. The streets were lined with slums which were unsteady. The walls were falling apart. The doors were unsteady. There was no windows, and they were full of families which were living along with animals. They reminded the writers of prehistoric man who lived just like animals. Mukesh stopped in front of one such door, hit hard with his foot and pushed it open. Mukesh's house was half built. In the corner was a firewood stone made with dead grass. A vessel with spinach leaves was kept on it. There were more plates with chopped vegetables in them. There was a thin young woman cooking the evening meal for the family. Though her eyes was full of smokes, she still smiled. She was the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. She was daughter-in-law of the house, who was in charge of 3 men, her husband, Mukesh, and their father. When father enters, she is in veil, as per the customs before the male elders. The father was a poor bangle maker, who labored for whole life. He could not even renovate his own house, and could not even send his sons to school. He only managed to teach them making bangles. Mukesh's grandmother says that it was Mukesh's father's destiny to be a bangle maker. Grandmother herself saw her husband become blind due to the dust from polishing the glass bangles. This profession has been carried on through the generations as per her grandmother. They were born in a caste which only knows bangle making. These bangles are everywhere, in the backyard, in the next house, in the yard, and even in the streets of the town. Bangles were of different colors. The bangle makers work in small and dark huts. The children sit next to the line of oil lamps whose flames are very unsteady. These children spent a lot of time in the dark. Their eyes would not adapt to the bright sunlight because they are used to darkness. Most of them lose their eyesight before adulthood. A young girl named Savita wore a faded pink colored dress. She was sitting with an elderly woman working on bangles. Her hands moved like a machine. The writer wonders whether Savita knew anything about the significance of the bangles, how sacred bangles are in marriages. The bangles symbolizes an Indian woman's suhag, Suhag means husband. Someday Savita will also be the bride. Bangles will be rolled onto her wrists. Same as the old woman beside her. This old woman still has bangles on her wrist, but unfortunately has lost her eyesight. This woman says that they are so poor that they can't even eat enough food. Woman's husband says that he doesn't know anything except bangle making. He says that he has achieved something which many fail to have achieved in their lifetime. He has at least built a house for his family, which many fail to do. For years, they have been doing the same thing, working so hard on it that they didn't even dare to do something else. The writer is suggesting a group of young men to form a cooperative to get out of the clutches of the cruel middlemen who have trapped their fathers and forefathers. But these group of men reply that even if they organize, they will be dragged to the jail. They are helpless. The writer felt that as they have no leader, they could not think of doing something different. From fathers to son, they all have been so tired. The writer sees two different worlds. One world has families who were stuck in the tradition of bangle making profession because of the caste they were born into. The other world is never-ending cycle of money lenders, middlemen, policemen, law keepers, government officials and politicians. Both these worlds have put tremendous pressure on these young boys to follow family tradition. These young boys lacked the boldness to confront the corruption in the society, though the writer was happy to see the spark in Mukesh. Mukesh wanted to be a motor mechanic. He wanted to learn the job. The writer asked Mukesh whether he dreams to fly planes. Mukesh became silent and refused. He did not know anything about planes. He only saw cars, so his dreams were only restricted up to motors. So this is how the story ends. Both Saheb and Mukesh have been deprived of their rights just because they are poor. One cannot dream and the other dreams but is trapped in the tradition of bangle making. So that's it for today. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much and stay safe.